Hello, how are you? Today I want to talk to you about this tuna challenge that's going around on the internet. People asked me, Patricia, make a video talking about this challenge of eating only tuna for 3 days. Let's talk more about this, what happens in the body, how to do it the right way, and what not to do so you don't harm your body. You're going to love it, especially because tuna is cheap, economical, and super healthy. I'm going to tell you about the benefits and everything else. Stay until the end, you won't want to miss this. Before we start, I want to ask you something. Do you eat tuna, sardines? Do you consume canned foods, fresh foods, like these fresh fish in your daily life, or do you eat more canned ones? When you go to buy tuna, is it tuna in water and salt? Tuna in olive oil? Tuna in oil? Tuna with pepper? What kind of tuna do you buy? Write it for me down below in the comments. I would love to see your comment. And remember to go ahead and like the video, right? A lot of people have been doing this 3-day test, where you start eating only tuna. There are 2 versions of this challenge that I've seen out there when I was researching to make this video. First, there are people who almost eat only tuna. They don't eat anything else. They don't drink anything else, just water and tuna, tuna and water. That's the most complicated one. And there's another version where you replace chicken or beef with tuna for 3 days. So out of these 2, obviously the one I would most recommend for you to do, if you're just going to try this 3-day test, it's the one where you replace other animal proteins with tuna. This way you can get its benefits, but it doesn't become an ultra restrictive diet, right? Because if you start eating only tuna for 3 days, first, I think it will be hard for you to handle eating just tuna because you end up getting sick of it. It's an extremely repetitive, monotonous diet, and your body actually starts to reject it. Tuna has a very strong flavor that can become quite overwhelming after a few meals. But on top of everything, you will go into ketosis. You might experience a persistent headache, and the entire diet becomes extremely repetitive. And there's also the issue of mercury. Of course, the mercury content in canned tuna is much lower, partly because the tuna typically used for canning tends to be smaller. The really large premium tuna are usually reserved for Japanese restaurants where they're served as steaks or sashimi. So in general, the smaller tuna have lower mercury levels, and those are precisely the ones most commonly supplied to the canning industry. For canning, to pack in water and salt and oil and so on. So despite that, we still need to be cautious about this because of the risk of mercury poisoning. But 3 days wouldn't really harm people. I actually have a video here on the channel talking about how to choose a good tuna, a good canned sardine. I'll leave it down here. I don't know if you've seen it yet because it's really cool. So let's think, if you replace it the right way, the other proteins by using this tuna, it can have an interesting effect on 3 things in your body. Glycemic response, satiety signaling, metabolic inflammation, which I think is the most interesting aspect of tuna. On the first day, one of the first changes you should start to notice is the stability of your body's energy. It may seem subtle, but metabolically, it's already a very important adjustment. When you switch protein sources, especially the more processed ones with tuna, you tend to reduce food combinations that usually increase the glycemic load. So you end up using less sauce, you won't eat anything breaded, nothing fried, you know? These are things that people usually end up doing with chicken or beef. So obviously also less ultra-processed food, right? So this directly impacts how glucose rises in your blood, prevents sharp spikes, and you start to have a more controlled response. This can also change the dynamics of insulin. It doesn't mean that it's going to be miraculous, but it can tend to stop rising excessively and already produces a very significant effect. So the first sign of this may show up in your energy levels. More stable energy, less drowsiness after meals, less need to snack or nibble. So it's a kind of metabolic predictability. Tuna protein is highly efficient at sending satiety signals, so it strongly signals this feeling of fullness in the gut. It's a lean protein, high in biological value, a very good protein. So it provides a lot of satiety and is very light for us with good digestibility. So it helps with this issue of common energy stability. Another benefit may be related to controlling hunger and impulses. That's because when glucose stops fluctuating so much, we can even change our behavior. It stops being that urgent signal to seek energy, to seek food. It can even reduce the craving for sweets and decrease the urge to snack throughout the day. Not all hunger is physiological. Often it's a rapid drop in glucose, but sometimes it's also a reward stimulus or even a trigger, an emotional response. So when this roller coaster calms down, the body simply stops demanding food all the time, and the protein from the tuna continues to help because it prolongs that feeling of fullness. This satiety lasts longer in our body, reduces the frequency of hunger, and stabilizes energy between meals. So even for an afternoon snack or even breakfast, a tuna spread can be a very interesting option to help you with satiety throughout the day. There's also the wonderful added benefit of omega-3 that tuna has, because it starts to act on inflammation and insulin sensitivity. That's because an inflamed body responds worse to insulin than a body that is functioning properly. And when omega-3, which is very present in tuna and highly bioavailable, comes into play, this inflammation decreases. As a result, the response to insulin improves, glucose can become more stable, and the body needs fewer corrections. So, it requires less energy. Therefore, that intense craving can also disappear because of this. So, if you're looking to add an ingredient that's rich in omega-3, anti-inflammatory, lean, a good protein, tuna is an excellent option. Another very interesting detail is the issue of metabolic balance. Because when that happens, our body naturally starts to much better organize its use of carbohydrates. When glucose and insulin levels are far more stable, it significantly reduces that sudden drop in energy, that intense craving for sugar. And it doesn't necessarily mean ketosis, because as I mentioned here, you would only go into ketosis if you ate only tuna. And the idea is for you to substitute chicken or beef with tuna. So the real point is that metabolic instability can improve, because omega-3 enhances this by acting on our brain. As I told you, it improves the feeling of satiety, reduces impulsive eating, and helps regulate appetite. So, as I mentioned once again, you can reduce your craving for sugar, feel less need for reward and dopamine, and you may experience mental clarity and better appetite control. It's worth mentioning that this only works if you also have a balanced diet, because there's no point in eating tuna pizza, right? Ideally, you should continue to have a balanced diet with low glycemic carbohydrates, plenty of fiber, vegetables, greens, fruits, grains, seeds, healthy fats. It's not about thinking, I'm going to eat tuna, so I'll have tuna pizza, breaded tuna. I don't even know if that's possible. Maybe just with the fillet itself. Japanese food with tuna, loaded with cream cheese, breaded, fried, that's not it. The idea is to have a balanced diet that includes tuna. So, to help you put this plan into practice, if you want to do it for 3 days, I've set aside some recipes I've already made here on the channel, all based on tuna, that might help you. The first is that classic burger that everyone loved, made with drained tuna, a little bit of egg, coconut flour, or oat bran to get the right consistency. Season it, I added green onions and grill it in a pan with a bit of olive oil. It turns out super tasty. You can serve it with a generous leafy salad, right? Or even with an interesting bread that you can make or buy ready-made, a healthy bread. It's up to you. Another option is a tuna omelet with vegetables, which I've also made here on the channel by beating eggs, adding tuna, vegetables like spinach, tomato, zucchini. It turns out great. It's a meal with a very low glycemic index, contains choline from the egg, protein, ideal for helping us control hunger. As I mentioned, it's very filling. I've also made a creamy tuna pie here on the channel, where I used beaten eggs with plain yogurt as the base. You can also use cottage cheese if you prefer. We mixed in the tuna and some vegetables. I used grated carrot, corn, peas. Then we bake it in the oven until it's nice and golden. And it's really good for making sure that when you're hungry, you won't end up opening an app and giving in. It's something you can have pre-made and just heat up later in the microwave, so it works really well. A really great option is tuna salad, right? Which I think is a classic. In mine, I used tuna, chickpeas, grated carrot, and a dressing made with plain yogurt, lemon, olive oil. So it's really interesting too for hotter days or when you want something lighter. Remember that tuna, as I mentioned before, works really well for small meals. When you make a spread or a pâté, instead of using store-bought mayonnaise as a base, you can mix it with plain yogurt, mustard, some fresh herbs, and then you can fill a sandwich with it or eat it with vegetables. Tell me how you would eat your tuna. I'd love to see your comment. A good tip is to try to look at tuna the same way you would look at chicken breast. Think of it like shredded chicken breast. It goes well in a natural sandwich, works great in pasta, is good in salads too, and requires zero preparation, right? You just open the can, drain the liquid, and that's it. Usually, I recommend tuna in water and salt because when we eat tuna in oil, we're adding a type of fat that isn't necessarily healthy. So if you want tuna with fat, the ideal is to look for tuna in olive oil, which will be healthier than regular tuna in oil. That's an interesting point. And remember to go heavy on the seasonings. Tuna goes well with turmeric, black pepper, oregano, paprika, chives, parsley, onion powder. It's very versatile and really takes on seasonings well. So I want to know how you use it, if you would take on this challenge or not. I'd love to see your comment. Remember to go ahead and like the video. That really helps me out, and share it with someone who needs it. Help grow this chain of kindness, as that is our goal here on the channel. See you next time. Bye.